A giant python had wrapped itself around a helpless leopardess deep in the savannah. Her cries echoed through the wild as rangers raced to reach her, but before they could intervene, a male leopard emerged from the shadows, and what he did left everyone speechless. This story will change the way you see wild instincts, love, and survival. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications. We bring you real, powerful stories of the animal kingdom every day. The sun had barely started to rise over the dusty plains of the Masai Mara when Ranger Callum spotted something strange through his binoculars. At first, it looked like a log twisting in the tall grass. But then he saw it. A leopardess, her body contorted in a deadly struggle. She wasn't alone. Wrapped tightly around her torso and back legs was a massive African rock python, easily over 16 feet long. Its coils shimmered in the morning light as it squeezed tighter and tighter. The leopardess's paws clawed the air, her tail thrashing wildly, but it was clear she was losing strength fast. Callum radioed in immediately. "I need backup, now. We've got a live constriction, female leopard. She won't last 10 more minutes." From across the reserve, 2 more rangers began speeding toward the location in a dusty Land Cruiser. Every second counted. A python attack on a fully grown leopard was rare, but not unheard of, and it was nearly always fatal. What made it even more urgent was the strange behavior Callum was noticing. About 15 meters away, pacing in the shadows of an acacia tree, was a male leopard. He wasn't running, he wasn't fighting, he was watching. "Why isn't he doing anything?" Callum muttered under his breath. The male's golden eyes locked onto the python. His muscles were tense, his ears flat, his breath low and rapid. He wasn't her attacker, but he wasn't helping her either. Not yet. As the rangers closed the distance on foot, tranquilizer rifles in hand, the python had nearly immobilized the leopardess. Her yowls had become weak, desperate gasps. Her claws no longer swiped. Her back legs had stopped kicking. But then the male leopard moved. It was sudden, violent, pure instinct. He lunged forward from his crouch with a speed that blurred the air around him. With a growl that split the silence, he launched himself directly onto the thickest coil of the python. Fangs bared, claws extended. He sank his teeth deep into the snake's back. The python uncoiled. Partially. Not enough. Callum shouted, "Wait! Hold your fire!" What they witnessed next would stay with them for the rest of their lives. The python hissed, deep, guttural, ancient. Its tail whipped the ground with such force that dust rose like smoke. The male leopard didn't flinch. He had one goal now, to save her. His jaws tightened around the thick, muscular body of the snake. The python, startled but not defeated, shifted its massive coils, releasing only part of its grip on the leopardess. Her chest moved. A faint breath, but she still couldn't rise. The rangers stood frozen for a moment, their tranquilizer rifles raised but useless. "If we shoot now, we might hit the wrong target," Callum whispered to his colleague Jackson. "He's doing what we couldn't." The male leopard reared back and struck again, this time clawing into the python's scales, leaving red streaks behind. The python reacted fast, curling toward him, trying to wrap him next. It was a deadly gamble, to trade one kill for another. But the male was younger, faster, and fueled by something stronger than instinct. A deep, primal connection. Perhaps the leopardess was his mate. Perhaps she had once saved him. No one could say, but there was something in his eyes that told a story older than man. He refused to lose her. Suddenly, the python released its grip. Not because it had surrendered, but because it was redirecting its attack. It lunged, not with fangs, but with its body, aiming to coil around the male. But the leopard was ready. He leapt sideways, barely avoiding the constriction, and circled back behind the snake. Then came a sound none of the rangers would forget, a growl of fury, of defiance, of love. The male leapt again and bit into the python's neck, shaking his head violently like a wildcat with prey. The python thrashed, nearly knocking the leopardess into the air, but she was no longer bound. She collapsed onto the ground, gasping, bleeding, but free. That was the signal. Callum yelled, "Now!" 3 tranquilizer darts flew through the air. 2 hit the python square in the side. The third struck a tree. Within seconds, the snake's movements began to slow. It writhed one last time before falling limp. The male leopard backed away, breathing hard. Blood dripped from his mouth, not his own. He looked at the rangers, then at the leopardess, who lay barely conscious, her ribs rising with shallow breath. And then slowly, he walked to her, placed his head against hers, and closed his eyes. The savannah was silent. The battle was over. But the story wasn't. The python lay still, its coils loosening in the dirt like a discarded rope. The air had turned thick with tension, even though the immediate threat was gone. The rangers lowered their rifles cautiously, unsure of what to do next. The male leopard hadn't moved. He remained curled beside the leopardess, pressing his body against hers, as if trying to lend her strength. His breathing was heavy, chest rising and falling with silent tremors, but his golden eyes never left her face. Jackson stepped forward, slowly. "She's alive, but just barely." Callum dropped to one knee, observing the wounded animal. Multiple bruises along the ribs, torn ligaments, maybe. "We need to get her treated, or she won't survive the night." But this wasn't a rescue center. It was the middle of the savannah, and they were hours from the nearest mobile vet unit. The male leopard lifted his head just slightly as the ranger approached with a medical kit. His expression wasn't aggressive, but protective, alert, unblinking. He didn't snarl or growl, but it was clear, "Don't take her from me." "Easy, boy," Callum whispered. He extended a gloved hand slowly toward the leopardess's neck to assess her pulse, and that's when something extraordinary happened. The male leopard, still bloodied, still shaking, licked her cheek. It was a brief gesture, gentle, human almost. His tongue swept across her face, removing bits of blood and dust from her fur. Then he looked at the ranger again. This time his eyes weren't threatening. They were pleading. "Let her live." Callum's throat tightened. "We have to do something," he said, turning to Jackson. "We can't sedate her without risking her life right now. But if we don't get her stable, we'll lose her anyway." The male leopard lay down again and placed his head lightly on her neck, as if trying to keep her warm. His body, though lean, quivered with fatigue. Yet he refused to leave. "She trusts him more than she'd ever trust us," Jackson said quietly, "and he's not leaving her side." The men stepped back and began preparing a transport stretcher, unsure if they'd even be able to move her. But just as the tarp was laid on the dirt, the leopardess stirred. Her front paw moved first, clumsy, weak, then the second. She attempted to lift her head and failed. The male helped her. He nudged her gently under the chin with his nose, helping her find balance. He didn't push. He supported. And slowly, trembling with every effort, she stood. The rangers froze. No one spoke. No one moved. The male stepped to her side and held his position like a sentry. She didn't walk toward the humans. She walked toward him. Together, shoulder to shoulder, they began to limp toward the edge of the clearing, toward the tree line where the wild took over again. The rangers didn't stop them. Callum lowered his radio. "Let them go." For a moment, it felt like something divine had happened. The male and female leopards, battered and bloodied, disappeared into the tall golden grass without a sound, like shadows melting back into the earth. The rangers stood motionless, watching them vanish. No one spoke. Even the wind seemed to hush in reverence. Back at base camp an hour later, the calm was broken. Callum and Jackson were summoned to a tense emergency meeting with Dr. Yara Benson, the head of the reserve's wildlife medical unit. Reports had reached the administration, a violent encounter between a leopard, a python, and rangers armed with tranquilizers. "Let me be clear," Yara said, her eyes sharp. "You didn't administer any aid to the injured female? You let them walk away?" Callum stood his ground. "We didn't let them walk away. We witnessed them survive. Together. That male leopard fought for her in a way I've never seen. She trusted him. She stood because of him." Jackson added, "She wouldn't have survived sedation. It was a judgment call." Yara didn't budge. "And if she dies in the wild? If that python left internal damage? What happens when tourists find a rotting carcass near one of the campsites?" Callum's jaw tightened. She made a choice. So did he. There was a long pause. Then she leaned back, exhaled. "Fine. But we're dispatching a drone team at dawn. We'll find them. If she's dying, we intervene." But the wild didn't like to be followed. The next morning, the drone was deployed over a 10-kilometer radius, scanning the brush and forest edges. Twice, they caught glimpses, fleeting flashes of spotted fur, indistinct tracks by a watering hole. But the leopards stayed elusive. Back in the bush, Callum returned alone to the scene of the fight. The blood on the dirt had dried into a dark stain. Python tracks cut deep into the ground still circled the site. He crouched and studied the impressions, trying to reconstruct what had happened second by second. And then he saw it. Fresh paw prints, 2 sets, moving side by side. They weren't wandering, they were traveling with purpose. He followed them slowly, making sure not to disturb the path. After nearly a mile, the prints veered off toward a rocky ledge where leopards were known to den. Carefully, silently, he climbed the ridge. At the top, shielded by shrubs, he paused. There they were. The male was lying in a shaded nook, eyes half closed, his flanks rising slowly. And curled beside him, still weak but very much alive, was the leopardess. She licked a wound on her foreleg, then rested her head against his side. They were safe, together. But Callum knew the reserve couldn't allow predators to go unmonitored, especially injured ones. There were rules, protocols. Still, something inside him whispered to walk away. As he turned to leave, a low growl stopped him. The male was awake, staring. Not in threat, in warning. "Stay away." Callum backed away slowly, his boots making no sound against the dry soil. The male leopard's eyes tracked him like a sniper's scope, not hostile, but intense, calculating. The message was clear. This space is sacred. Back at base, Callum didn't report what he saw. He couldn't. Not yet. If he did, drones would be dispatched again. Veterinarians with tranquilizer guns, park managers with their checklists and sedatives and charts, but what he had witnessed wasn't a medical situation. It was a moment of survival earned through loyalty. The male leopard had claimed guardianship. Callum wouldn't betray that. But later that evening, Jackson came to his tent, holding a dusty old binder. "You need to see this," he said. It was a field record, 10 years old. Inside were notes from a different ranger, one who had disappeared under tragic circumstances during a storm near the northern ridge. The last entry mentioned a young male leopard cub, found beside his dead mother, wrapped partially in an abandoned poacher's net. He had cuts on his face, weak heartbeat, barely breathing. They had nicknamed him Ghost because of his pale golden eyes and how he vanished anytime someone got close. Callum read through the pages, heart sinking. "This has to be him," he whispered. It's the same ridge, the same stare. Jackson nodded. But that's not all. He flipped to the back of the report. There, stapled, was a photo. In it, Ghost was nestled against the belly of an injured adult female, the same leopardess he now guarded. That's her? Callum asked. Jackson confirmed it with a quiet nod. She raised him, somehow against all odds, and now, all these years later, he's returned the favor. The revelation hit hard. They weren't just mates, they weren't just leopards defending each other. They were family. Ghost hadn't just fought the python for survival. He had fought for the one who gave him life when no one else did. It changed everything. Back in the control room, Yara was reviewing new camera trap footage. One image froze her in place, a blurry frame showing Ghost carrying what looked like a small rabbit in his mouth, dropping it beside the leopardess. He's hunting for her, she murmured. This wasn't just animal instinct, it was something deeper. Something that blurred the line between wild and human emotion. Callum made a decision. We're ending the surveillance, he told her. She hesitated. You know what that means? Yes, he said. It means trusting them. Outside, the sun began to set over the savannah, casting long shadows over the land. Somewhere out there, Ghost stood watch beneath the trees, his body a shield, his history a secret. But not for long, because the world was about to hear their story. For weeks, the savannah whispered the story of Ghost and the female who raised him. No one saw them directly after that. Not the rangers, not the tourists, but signs remained. Fresh paw prints in the riverbank mud, the carcass of a small antelope carefully laid in the shade, tufts of fur left in narrow groves where they might have slept. Rangers learned to interpret the clues like old poetry left in the dirt. Callum, too, had changed. He no longer viewed the big cats as just predators to track or collar. Something about Ghost had pierced his professional detachment. Perhaps it was the way the male leopard had looked at him. Not with fear, not with rage, but with understanding. A sentient silence. He knew that look. He'd seen it once before. Years earlier, Callum had lost his own brother to cancer. The last time that they spoke, his brother hadn't been able to talk, but his eyes had said everything. I'm not afraid. Just stay with me. And Ghost's eyes had been the same. Weeks passed. Then, one golden afternoon, as the wind brushed gently through the acacia trees, a small group of photographers entered the east corridor of the reserve. They weren't expecting anything special. The light was too harsh, the animals too quiet, but as they crested a low rise, they froze. There, resting beneath the shade of a fig tree, lay Ghost. He looked older now. A deep scar curved along his shoulder. His body was leaner. His golden eyes, just as luminous, blinked slowly in the warm breeze, but he wasn't alone. The leopardess was gone. Beside him, cradled between his front paws, was a small cub, no older than a few weeks. Its spots still carried the shadowy fuzz of youth, and Ghost, the once wild and untouchable male, was grooming it gently, carefully, with that same soft precision he had once offered the one who raised him. When the cameras clicked, Ghost didn't move. He let them capture it, a symbol, a full circle. From orphan to fighter to guardian to father. The photos spread quickly. Within days, international outlets picked them up. The wild's most loyal leopard, one headline read. A story of survival and legacy, wrote another. But it wasn't just a wildlife story. It was a story of memory, of a bond that passed between generations without a word, of a male leopard who carried within him not just the instincts of a predator, but the heart of someone who had once been saved, and now knew how to save. At the reserve, Yara stood beside Callum as the photo hung, framed on the research wall. Ghost, with the cub between his paws, the look in his eyes not fierce, but calm, watchful. You were right to let him go, she said finally. They would have never survived apart. Callum didn't answer right away. He was staring at the cub. Do you think he knows that she's gone? No. Do you think the cub knows who raised him? What that leopard gave to protect his bloodline? Yara tilted her head. Maybe not now, but one day. Maybe. 1 year later, the rains had returned early, flooding the lower plains. Grass rose knee-high, and the trees stood full and proud again. Ghost was seen less and less, just flickers between tree trunks, the flash of golden fur under moonlight. Then one morning, Callum received a radio call. A ranger had found something in a dry ravine. He arrived with quiet footsteps, expecting nothing more than a carcass or abandoned cub. But instead, beneath a low canopy of vines, he found a body. It was Ghost. He had died lying upright, legs tucked under him like a sphinx. His eyes were closed, peaceful. No signs of violence, no blood. Just age. But there was something else. Curled beside him, with his head buried deep into Ghost's fur, was the same young cub. Now older, stronger, eyes wide with grief, refusing to leave. Callum felt a heaviness swell in his chest. The cub wasn't crying, but somehow the silence felt like it echoed across the entire savannah. They didn't move the body. They placed a small wooden sign nearby, nothing flashy, just a marker with a date and a name the staff had all come to know. Ghost, the one who returned. Tourists weren't allowed near the area. The cub eventually left, and in the years that followed, he too became part of the silent dance of predators and prey in the wild. But rangers say he never strayed far from that ravine. Every few months, fresh paw prints would appear beside the grave, of vigil and tracks, and now that story has reached you. Because sometimes the most profound truths don't come from words or even people. They come from the ones who live quietly, fiercely, and love in ways we've only begun to understand. Ghost's story reminds us that family isn't always blood, and survival isn't always about the strongest. Sometimes it's about the most loyal. And that loyalty, passed from mother to son to cub, can echo across generations like a heartbeat in the tall grass. If this story touched your heart, don't let it stay silent. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who believes in the wild beauty of loyalty and legacy. Let's keep Ghost's story alive.